China, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Google, they're all planning now to put AI data centers in space. Yes, in orbit around the Earth, in an orbit about 800 kilometers high initially, perhaps sun synchronous orbits where the satellites would always be in the sun. Why would they want to do that? Well, they need energy and they need to be able to cool their data centers. And they're putting extreme stress on our power grid here on Earth and also our water supplies. In fact, Elon Musk said that when he gets the Starship going, it's going to be cheaper to put them in space than on Earth. Now, that may sound kind of zany, but he is talking about some low costs. And really, the power is a big issue. The water cooling is a big issue. China is even starting to put some under the ocean. But I am going to talk on here about some other options they might explore to make all this work even better and more synergistically than what they've offered and said so far. But just to give you kind of an idea, just imagine that this little moon here is Earth instead of a moon. And imagine this is the sun, and we're shining on it here, if I can get the sunlight right. If you notice, there is an area between, well, I got two lights on there instead of one. Let's say, there we go, that's better. There is an area where there's a shadow. Well, I got another light shining from the bottom, so that's kind of throwing me off here. But there's a shadow and a light area. Well, between that shadow and a light area, there is a dawn dusk kind of a borderline here. Satellites can actually polar orbit around the Earth in such a way that they're always in the sun. It's called a sun synchronous orbit. And in a sun synchronous orbit, you got sunlight 24/7. But here's the other thing. If you are, again, let's say this is the Earth, and let's assume that this is geosynchronous satellite way out from Earth. There is a distance of about 22,000 miles away from Earth that when you orbit, your orbit is always over the same spot on Earth, always. It's called geosynchronous because it's synced with the Earth, geo. And so as the Earth goes around, it matches 24 hours to make an orbit. And it just so happens that geosynchronous orbit, because Earth's only 8,000 miles in diameter, and you're in an orbit that's got, do the circumference power 2 pi r, the 2 pi r, or r is the radius of this, it's a huge number compared to the radius of Earth. It turns out that you've got sunlight over 99%, I think 99.9% of the time when you are out in geosynchronous orbit. So satellites out there can get a lot of sunlight too, almost always in the sun. And you can put enough of them up there that if you got one shadowed, and if they're solar power satellites, if that's where you put your power satellite, they can beam power to rectangular receiving antennas on Earth. And you could have actually that brief little time that it's in the shadow, you could compensate with other satellites out in geosynchronous orbit, other solar power satellites. So we're going to go into that a little bit and talk about how that can play into it also. Well, let's just do it now. Well, so they're looking at these sun synchronous satellites, but there's only so much orbit around the Earth. I mean, there's still a ton of room up there. But when you're talking about putting all these different companies up there, it turns out that one of the key drivers, there's several key drivers for an AI data center. Right now, what's really constraining them is power and cooling. They need water, lots of it, and they need a lot of power, They're straining our grid. Our grid cannot handle what they're putting on us right now. And you're going to pay for it through your utility rates. They're passing the cost for these things on to you. Well, this is a way to relieve you from paying that cost to get them out of the system. Now, the other constraint is latency, because as you got a data center, and you got all these computers talking to each other, internet, like you go on the internet and you ask Grok a question, well, that's going to the data center. It's going to process it and bring it back to you, maybe pop around 2 or 3 different server farms. And so what happens is you want that answer back fast, And if it's got a long lag time in the communication, that takes longer. They try to keep those lag times real short. When you're in sun synchronous orbit, it's not like the Starlink satellites that are everywhere. Now, at geosynchronous orbit, you got a long lag. You don't want to put a data center way out in geosynchronous orbit, but you could put a power transmitter out in geosynchronous orbit. You see what I'm saying? But what you would do in this case, because if all your satellites are in one little orbit around Earth, you still got a lot of lag time communicating. You could use Starlink satellites, laser links, makes it faster, and that's part of why they want to go up there. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Still, they would be better off if they could distribute those data centers more globally around the Earth instead of just sun signals. That would cut lag times quite a bit, quite a bit. So if the geosynchronous satellites were beaming power to data centers that were distributed in different places in Earth orbit, then instead of having solar panels on, they could have rectennas, receiving antennas. This would be antennas tuned to the microwave frequencies, and they could have Schottky diodes that converts almost 100% electricity from microwave at a rectenna site. It's amazing the efficiency of a Schottky diode. It's awesome. But anyway, so they could or they could use laser power, but it's probably would be probably microwave beamed at these satellites. That's one way to do it. But now there's another way that might be better, especially for aiming. That's to put the data centers in the ocean for cooling and have a rectenna site above them, or put them on the ocean and have a rectenna site that am I recording? Yeah, I'm recording. Have a rectenna site above them. Pardon me, I have a problem with my Zoom here. Have a data. It actually was about to end my session. Put a data center in the water or on at the surface of the water where you get the ocean water for cooling. And the Chinese are already putting them in the water and have the rectenna site floating in the water above it. This is something you would call seasteading, basically, is that you could actually put a little town or a community right there in conjunction with all the structure and infrastructure you'd be putting in the water for the data center. You'd want to be able to service it anyway in the rectenna site, but that rectenna site would give you structure in the water to do other things with. You could put a growing area underneath it or other energy reception to kind of work in conjunction with power beam, like something that could harness the energy from the waves, maybe the ocean current up below, or the temperature differentials within the ocean. Here's another advantage. It can also help municipal water supplies, not only by not sucking the water out of the towns using the ocean, but if you're pumping water from deep, deep, deep down, there's a point where we're in the ocean close to the bottom, especially in great depths, water is pretty much universally at 34 degrees Fahrenheit, or just above, about a degree centigrade above freezing. So if you could pump water all the way up, now here's one thing: once you got a tube of water, you're only pumping off the top, and it's going to suck it from the bottom anyway. So it's not like you got to pump hard like you might think. You're just siphoning it off the top. So if you get this tube way down to the bottom and you're pumping this water off, you're getting cold water coming out from the bottom of the ocean. That's got a lot of advantages, many advantages. For one, if you run it through a bunch of pipes in air above the water, the air is warm. It's going to produce a lot of condensate on those pipes, a lot of condensate. This condensate is like dew. It's like your cold colored glass in the summer getting water on the outside. When I was a little kid, I was wondering, how's this water going through the glass? When that's coming from the atmosphere. So you could actually produce fresh water for drinking for the community there at the seastead, or if you're doing it scale, you could be sending this water to shore. The cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, New York, Seattle, Portland, all these coastal cities, New Orleans, Tampa, Miami, You could send this water to the shore for people, and it would alleviate things like the drain on the Colorado River. Or if you had one of these maybe down in Baja, some of this water could go up to Phoenix. Arizona here is got some water issues, including a data center they're putting here in Arizona. I don't know why are they putting a data center here in Arizona. It's horrible. But anyway, we're going to show all this stuff. So that's what they could do. They could actually pull the water out, and it's got another advantage. Colder water holds more oxygen than warm water. That's why there's more fish in the polar regions. A whale will go to the equatorial regions to birth its calf, but for feeding, it goes back to because there's less predators. It goes back to the more polar regions where the water is colder and there's a whole lot more fish because colder water holds more oxygen and it supports more aquatic life. Now you're pulling up the cold water. So if you want to have a place where you're growing aquaculture, fish, shrimp, oysters, sea cucumbers, whatever it is you're growing for aquaculture, you could dump this cold water back out into the cages, tanks, wherever you're growing this stuff. And suddenly they got water with a lot more oxygen in it. And it's cold water, it's going to want to sink, so it will carry away all the waste that builds up and accumulates around your aquaculture systems. That's a big problem, these aquaculture systems, is all the waste stuff that accumulates where you're growing this stuff. So it would be awesome for growing fish, for growing mollusk of various sorts, whatever it is you want to grow, especially animal-wise, that would grow in water and aquaculture systems. This would enhance by giving them more oxygen, which means more content and getting waste out. So huge advantages to pumping water up, plus help cooling your data centers. Your data center might be right below that, with that colder water falling down. So you get a threefer there. You can kill three birds with one stone. Not a twofer, not a one for a threefer. So there's huge advantages to this. Not to mention, there's actually, you could pull some energy out of the water differential too. There's things, concepts called OTEC or something like that. Like I said, and you could, with a rectenna site for receiving the microwaves, you could also amplify the energy you get there by harnessing wave power systems, maybe even direct solar right there on the ground. Right there, excuse me, on the ground, but at the rectenna site. And you could have kelp farms under the rectenna. Now, the kelp probably don't need as cold water. If you do, you could divert some of that over there too. But you could grow kelp, various seaweed. You could have a huge ag center and water center and energy center and AI center all combined in one. Now, I think that could create some jobs. Some of the fresh water doesn't. Maybe you grow regular vegetables, just, fruits and vegetables like you grow on land right there, because you could take that rectenna center and put glass over the framework and have essentially a greenhouse. You see what I'm saying? Tons of things you could do. There's tons of grow biomass for fuel. There's another fuel source. There are tons of things you could do. Maybe the kelp would be your biomass or food. You could feed animals with it, back on shore. No, the ocean could be a big game changer. And this is why your data centers would be close to your cities, offshore, around the world, distributed. They'd be tied in with fiber optic cables in this case. But that's a huge advantage right there. Huge advantage. So, but this would put a market for building satellites with power transmission out in geosynchronous orbit. Solar power satellites, or power sats, as they're sometimes called. So I'm going to show you a few things just to back up what I'm saying, because I always get people, and also illustrate a few other points around this, because I always get people saying, where do you get this stuff? So I'm going to show you where I get this stuff. Hang on real fast. Here we are. Beijing's new frontier for AI computing is 800 kilometers above Earth. Indeed, this is talking about them wanting to do it in 3 phases. Focus on breakthroughs of phase 1, 2025 to 2027, breakthroughs in key technologies, power generation, thermal management in space, up to 200 kilowatts of total power, 1,000 pops of computing capacity. So they're talking about starting this like pretty much right now. Phase two would be develop technologies for on-orbit assembly and construction while reducing costs. Phase three, move toward large scale. The phase three would be 2031 through 2035. So this would all be within 10 years, these three phases. Move toward large scale commercial deployment, including mass production of satellites, network launches, and in orbit docking to create fully built out orbital data centers capable of supplying next generation space primary computation. Skynet, anyone? Yikes. Some of this is a little scary, but again, China's focus tech firms to build AI computing facilities in space. This is another article talking about their plans to do this. There's plenty of articles out here that discuss this. I'm not making this stuff up. They claim they're going to do it in three phases. And here's more of it. Latest to join the competition is Zonki Tiansun or Cosmospace, founded in 2024. So they got companies that have formed just to do this, just to do this. Now, Elon Musk is also talking the same game, AI satellites. He calls his Galaxy Mind or Galactica. Does a Battlestar come with this? Well, I hate all these pop-ups. Does a Battlestar come with this? Anyway, so the next grand objective of Elon's empire might be to bring artificial intelligence to deep space. Well, Earth orbit's not deep space. So I'll take a little exception with that. Galaxy Mind or Galactica. You see what he's talking about naming it. So what he's saying is he can combine what he's doing with Tesla, SpaceX. The Tesla's got the robots, of course. SpaceX, the launch service, and the communication satellites, like I communicate through here. XAI, which is his data centers. And he's actually talking about creating a whole new company along these lines that integrates all this stuff into these AI data centers to put in space beyond XAI. And that company would probably be Galaxy Mind or Galactica with a Battlestar. And so here he is talking about it in an interview where he says, well, I think there's increasingly convergence actually between SpaceX, Tesla, and XAI in that if the future is solar powered AI satellites, which it makes, he says, pretty much makes the needs to harness a non-trivial amount of energy of the sun, says you have to move to solar powered AI satellites in deep space. He says that's just the only way to do it, basically. That's what he's claiming. And he said it'll actually be cheaper than some other sources. Then, not to be left out, Google CEO Sundar Pichai, however you say his name, I don't know, is talking about the same thing. Jeff Bezos is saying we'll have in 20 years gigawatt data centers in space. Gigawatt. And Google CEO says that, hey, we're just a decade away, just like the China's plan. A decade away. We're talking 10 years to these big data centers in space. Just 10 years, a decade away. Guys, stuff is moving in the AI world. Stuff is moving in the robotics world so fast right now, space development, that it shouldn't surprise you. But here's the issue. We got to get away from this. AI drives Arizona desert data center boom. This isn't when we need a data center boom in the desert when you got to have all this cooling water. You know, Arizona is been challenged for water big time. They're talking, 100-acre sites here. See that? So Arizona's experiencing a rapid surge in construction and land acquisition for these data centers. Guys, it's just nuts. The U.S. now hosts 5,400 data centers. Wow. Can you believe that? And they're just getting started. Oh, yeah, Bill Gates will factor in this too. and he's a big part of what's putting these data centers. He's got $1 billion investment in one near Phoenix, where water is a big challenge, and these data centers suck water and power. They got to be cool, big time. And they're putting a big strain on our power grid. Uh, and this says your home appliances. Now, that's interesting. Is straining America's power grids big time. And we're talking about having roving blackouts just because of these data centers, and you paying for it out of your power bill. So you're not just paying for it when you pay to use an AI system, you'll be paying for it in your power bill too. So this is crazy. So hopefully, if they do this, at least it'll get, they won't be taxing your power bill to cover it. So in any event, my friends, let me show you a little bit more. China, like I said, they're going underwater. They already have an underwater data center. We're not talking the future. There it is. They're already doing it. Yes, they're Highlander. And they launched it near the Hainan Island, where they also launched some of those crazy spy balloons I was telling you about in previous videos on here in my Green Race channel. So the energy demands of AI data centers come largely from cooling requirements for the servers. And so that's why they're going underwater, to cool it. To cool it. And it's not a bad idea. And it fits with what I was talking about. There's this whole concept for seasteading. We're not making this up. This is an idea right here for a city block, basically, floating in the ocean. And this is a modular concept where they could actually put several of these together and grow a floating city. And there's several little programs and platforms that are actually aiming to do this. One of them is a libertarian group that's planning to do. And hey, it's not the first time Tenochtitlan, the Mexican Aztec capital, where today there's that all that lake is filled in. This is Mexico City today, but a lot of it was built on rafts floating in the lake. That's how this place got started. Maybe it's one of the soil there is so susceptible to earthquakes today. It shows the temples on a solid ground piece of island in the middle of the lake. But yeah, they actually grew food on rafts. They built their houses on rafts, and the plants grew roots down into the bottom as a shallow lake, and they fixed themselves and they helped turn it into land essentially. But so this whole thing of aquaculture is not a new idea. It's been done. Venice is on stilts, part of it. So, yeah, so there's other places. Here is a self-recognized micronation called Sealand, built on a oil rig, which is a part, out from the United Kingdom. I think some people dispute its status as a micronation, but that's what here's Clubstead. Here's an idea for a aquaculture. That's an interesting one right here. Looks about like an oil tanker that somebody's building on. And they got them, a basketball court in the center? A cruise ship. Blue Seed. Yeah. Just see some of the various seasteading concepts. So you could have there's a lot of interesting ideas for this. A lot of interesting ideas. So the seasteading is not a bad idea. Ocean colonization. You can see also people are building land out in the waters. This is covering a lot of the same stuff. Ocean colonization. There's some oil rigs that could be converted, drilling rigs in that case. So this is an exciting potential. Maybe seasteading could lead to spacesteading. There's an underwater habitat concept. Actually, an underwater habitat built by a German company here called Helgoland in 2010. I don't know that it actually launched, but but China's talking about doing these kind of things too, underwater habitats. So there's various variations. You can float, have an access shaft, the surface semi-autonomous, or totally submerged. Anyway, now this fits with, I'm thinking about taking my universal habitat concept like this, and based on that, coming up with a seastead floating platform by having a bunch of these gathered together. This is my Martian version. That's my earlier work on it. But this is a base unit that would go inside a bigger seastead habitat. And you may also be aware that I actually come up with the concept for putting all that in a floating balloon-like structure, and I cover that in this video. It's also covered somewhat in this video too. So I'm talking with Bob Zubrin, who started the Mars Society. I got a lot of content on this channel you might want to check out. Anyway, in these space solar power stations I was talking about putting out in geosynchronous orbit, this is a couple of concepts for what they may look like. Um, that concept actually predates what they're claiming here. I've seen this same kind of architecture almost back in the late 1970s at a power set conference held at the University of Alabama in Huntsville that was chaired by David Christensen, an old friend of mine, back in 1979. Uh, the power set concept is typically attributed to Peter Glacier, is that a lot of people say he came up with it. But I'm gonna tell you, Ernst Stullinger, one of the head scientist of Wouter von Braun, came up with the idea earlier. So it did not originate with Peter Glacier, although he was the first one that made it popular. So here's concepts for building these things. Here's your ground antenna site. And the idea is you'd have a pilot beam that would feed back up the power set. So the beam wouldn't drift. It would stay focused there and not pose a hazard to people elsewhere. A lot of people can be worried about that if it's on ground. I really prefer the idea of putting them out at ocean on ground so that you don't have all this microwave energy. It would be a low intensity microwave, like less intensity than sunlight, but microwave converts 100% to electricity where sunlight does not. So that would be the advantage. So, and China, yeah, they got a power set already in plan. A 1 kilometer wide solar array they're planning to put in space. They claim it collects as much energy a year as the total oil that can be extracted from Earth, maybe in a year. That's a big claim. Uh, not with one satellite, a kilometer wide. There's something wrong with that claim. I've been seeing that repeated so much, and I need to sit down and do the math on that, but that is way off. But yeah, you could collect a lot of power. You're not going to answer all the Earth's power needs with one. Although Gerard K. O'Neill was talking about building larger than this, and I think he had a dozen or a couple dozen he thought would out at geosynchronous orbit like this actually answer the mail for that. And their plan was to build them from lunar resources. Here they're showing a plan for building them with asteroidal resources. And here's a mass driver attached to an asteroid. It's a coil gun, linear electric coil gun. And here's the Bernal sphere space colony concept that you may have seen me talk about in some other videos. That's what that guy is. So literally, uh, this whole thing with the AI data centers may be a step towards seasteading and also space colonization. It could be a step. In fact, I'm planning to write a book at some point where I connect all this stuff. And here we are with a lunar mine being one of the ways to get materials to them. A lot of people talk about mining helium-3. We don't have fusion yet. We can do solar. So this could be this initial concepts for a mass driver on the moon was to support the way to build power sets in space with not having to lift all the material from Earth. But you need to have space manufacturing. Once you can manufacture in space materials from asteroids and comets and the moon, then the whole economy of space becomes boomtown. It changes everything dramatically. Suddenly, it's a gold mine up there. There's so much resources and energy in space, it's going to change the world's economy like you never thought of. And it would be feasible at some time to build big space facilities like these. Gerard Kelnell came up with this concept back in the early 1970s based on 1970s bridge building technology for the structural elements of this. They were like 4 miles wide and 20 miles long, co-rotating to cancel out the centrifugal gyroscopic effects so that you can keep it pointed at the sun. And inside, mountains, trees, lakes, rivers, clouds, rain. It's a world turned inside out. And there's better concepts for it now with better technology than back then. But now, if you come to my channel, you're going to see I got videos talking about mining space, why it's important to get there. And this is one of them talking about China is already sending a probe right now to one of these quasi moons, which is kind of orbiting Earth, an asteroid which has become a temporary moon, which, guys, is a huge resource and it's going to be a lot easier to mine than actually the moon. But it could also be a threat to us. So this is a very important video to consider. It could be a threat and a promise, an opportunity. You will also find that I've covered, let's see here, come up, right here, them doing it on the moon. And I've talked about how China could rule Earth and the moon with a mass driver, how it could be actually a huge threat to us. What they could do with mass drivers, basically hurling rods from God all the way from the moon, coming a lot faster than coming from Earth orbit, like the conventional rod from God concept. So, guys, this is why we can't afford to let China get to the moon or asteroids without us being there, because we need to be there just to make sure they're not going to do that to us. But the resources available, the economic benefits of doing it will be off the charts. You got to put in some investment up front, but it's going to be well worth it. Maybe the Space Force should be funding part of this as a defensive measure. So, and hey, if we don't go into space, we got to face these civilizational challenges which can wipe us out, wipe out our civilization, and more than you might think. They're actually far more frequent than you might think. And we've already used so much of our easy to get to resources, we may not be able to rebuild our civilization as we know it if we really fall down, like well, I expect we will if we lose the power grid. So, guys, there's a lot of challenges. We need to get about the business of selling and developing space right now. And the resources are so vast that the asteroids around Earth would allow us to build a huge number, just near Earth asteroids, a huge number of those Bernosphere habitats. You could build enough of them. You could actually replicate the surface area of the Earth 20% from the near Earth asteroids, 20% of the surface area of the Earth. If you go out to the main belt asteroids, you could actually replicate the surface area of the Earth 500 to maybe better than 1,000 times over. Now, if you go out to the Kuiper Belt, which is a thin disk like right here inside orbiting the sun, and further out into the Oort cloud, which is a more diverse, spherical distribution of comets that orbit our sun way out, up to 2 light years out. There are literally Carl Sagan numbers in there, billions and billions of comets, at least meaning billions. Enough that you could replicate the surface area of the Earth just from the comets 35,700 times, roughly, give or take a few thousand. 35,700 times the surface area of the Earth in Bernospheres, O'Neill columns, basically hollow out a comet. But that's also probably the best way to survive in case the dark forest concept of threats from other civilizations is true, and you would build these into what I call dark fortresses. And that would be the ultimate way to deal with threats from other worlds if we're drawing too much attention down here with the stuff we're doing. And maybe they want to wipe us out because we might be perceived as a threat. And that is actually my answer to the Fermi paradox. And I go in more detail in this video to talk about the Fermi paradox. My theory, my answer to the Fermi paradox is the dark fortress concept, which is kind of an offshoot of the dark forest. So what I am going to do for your benefit so that you will know what to look at is I'm going to include a video. Oh yeah, this is my Green Greg's channel. So you might want to check it out. But right here, this video here, Civilization channel Cycles, you probably want to watch that. But I also want you to watch this video right here because I talk about the moon. It didn't get a lot of views. I talk about the moon and why we absolutely have to go there. And if you want to see why we got to go to space, Chinese are they're on their way. China and Russia. We can't afford for them to get there and put a mass driver there that could take us out. We also can't afford for them to do it on the quasi moons. Oh yeah, not on this quasi moon video. I also got one about Mind Space Now. That's a good one to watch. Mind Space Now. In fact, I think this is. I'm going to put the one for the Chinese moon thing, but you want to see this one too. So let me stop the share. So to see that video, click right here. Put the banner right here. Click it, and you can watch that video on why we got to mine the moon, why we got to get there, and keep China from putting a mass driver there. It's okay if they put a mass driver there, if we're there to stop them from using it against us. And they probably feel the same way about us putting one there. Okay, fine. We'll all be in one happy club together, maybe. I don't know. That'd be kind of hard to us all be in one happy club, but if we're all there, we could prevent mayhem from the other side, right? So there you are. So I want to thank you for watching. Bang the bell, click all. Yeah, subscribe, bang the bell, and click all, and share my videos far and wide because nobody else brings you content like this. So what I've done is I've taken the AI data center concept in space, and I say, hey, power it from geosynchronous satellites, not just sun synchronous, and so you can put some in different places in orbit, and also power the Seastead data centers. And I think that's a big one. I think they need to look at that and put a lot of them in the ocean, not just out there. But if you're putting data centers in space, also, you're not going to need to put regolith and the moons and the asteroids around them. So you'll be safe against orbital debris. Yeah, space mining is going to be huge. Anyway, thank y'all for watching, and Greg out.